go. I take care of the place while the master is away.
Coffee with Jeff. Coffee with Jeff. Coffee with Jeff.
Well, hello there. My name is Jeff. I'm an old man from the Midwest, and I'm so glad you could join me. Before we get started, I have something to talk about. I have come to the conclusion that people need to belong. They have an inner desire to be part of a group or club. The more exclusive, the better. They latch on to things that perhaps don't deserve their loyalty. Look at Tommy Wiseau, for instance, the writer, director, and star of the 2002 film The Room. He is, in my opinion, an incompetent filmmaker who made a horrible film, yet he has become a cult hero to many. People worship the man. In fact, you read about any badly made film and the first thing you hear is, has developed a cult following. You know, I enjoy many of these films, you know that, but I have no desire to join a Facebook group or go to a fan convention. I mean, if Orson Welles was still alive and he was going to speak at a screening of Touch of Evil, yeah, I would be there. But Tommy Wiseau talking about The Room? I don't think so. And that goes with today's film, Manos, The Hands of Fate. While I enjoy researching the history of this film, I never want to watch this film again, not without the riffing. I'll watch it one more time for next week's show, but that's it. So now, you know what? We have to go back in time. Back in time to 1993. A 34-year-old mother of two, Jackie, had been wondering something for quite a while. As a child, she, with her father, had acted in a movie, a low-budget film shot in El Paso, Texas. It was one of the best memories of her childhood. But the film had disappeared and she always wondered, whatever happened to it? Jackie had been looking for a copy ever since she was in high school with no luck. And by January of 1993, her dad was living in Oregon and she with her family in California. Now, her father, Tom, was a Mystery Science Theater 3000 fan, and one rainy day in Oregon, he had been dozing on the couch, drifting in and out with the TV on. Suddenly, he was woke by the sound of some familiar music, something known as Torgo's theme. He called his daughter and said, "You won't believe this." It was the film she had been thinking about for years, on TV. She saw an 800 number on the Comedy Central channel screen, and she called the HBO office and a man named Matthew answered. She explained that her whole family was involved with this film and could she get a copy. There was a long pause and suddenly Matthew said, "Oh my God, are you Debbie?" Matthew was nice enough to make her a copy and send it her way. Jackie couldn't realize how this one moment would change her life forever. The discovery of this film started months earlier with a man named Frank Conniff. Frank had been a stand-up comic in New York and was in Minneapolis as part of a treatment for substance abuse. He was eventually hired by Mystery Science Theater 3000 during their second season, taking the place of the departing J. Elvis Weinstein as one of the Mads, TV's Frank. He was also a writer on the show. Now, one of his duties was to go through the stacks of films to see if any were right for the show. In one of the stacks of tapes, he came across Manos, The Hands of Fate. While the group was eating lunch, he put it on. Our jaws dropped, he said. I just remembered being astonished by it. Manos, The Hands of Fate was shown to Joel and the Bots on January 30th, 1993, and it's the film I'm going to talk about today. It's the story of a husband, wife, and young daughter who wind up at a lodge which contained a goat-legged man and a mysterious master who lives with his 6 wives. It's shocking. It's beyond your imagination. A cult of weird, horrible people who gather beautiful women only to deface them with a burning hand. Manos, The Hands of Fate. Now, it's hard to explain this film or why it exists, but to do so, we need to go back to the beginning, and that starts with a man named Hal Warren. Now, it's often been reported that Hal was a fertilizer salesman in El Paso, but that doesn't seem to be the case. That might have come from Michael Weldon's Psychotronic Encyclopedia of Film. and probably has been repeated over and over because it adds humor to the story. But it seems that Hal was an insurance salesman and acted in local theater in El Paso, Texas. Harold Paul Warren was born in New Haven, Connecticut and lived from 1923 to 1985. At age 16, he was a nightclub comedian out east. At first, Mr. Warren did a few jokes and impersonations, and as he gained more experience and routines, he appeared at many of the better nightclubs in New York, Pennsylvania, New York, and later Texas. Before leaving the East, Mr. Warren went into summer stock for 2 seasons at Lakewood and Mount Etna, Pennsylvania. In 1949, Mr. Warren wrote a musical comedy, Chaos in Khaki, which included 17 songs. His writing experience covered a wide range. Warren, an entertainment director for the 18th Corps U.S. Army, even wrote and produced a musical comedy called Chaos in Khaki. As a result, one song, Fantasy of Love, was published and recorded. Warren and his wife Norma moved here from Houston in January, although he spent most of his life in New York and Connecticut. He continued his acting in El Paso, including a play called Mary Mary. The Hollywood actor Dirk Wilson will be portrayed by Harold Warren, a local insurance man whose acting experience ranges from television through stage plays to nightclub comic. He studied acting in the Army through the Pennsylvania State Extension Program and at the University of Houston. He was a probation officer in a film series and played several television roles on the TV Dramatic Playhouse in Houston, Texas. Among his many stage roles has been Earl in Night Swimming, Bull Moose in Little Abner, and Malachi in Matchmaker. In El Paso, he was in a production of Henry IV. Starring as the lead character was Tom Neyman, who would go on to play the Master. Many other people who would be involved in Manos also worked on the play. Now, I'm talking about Hal a little bit more than I normally would, and that's because, well, usually he's passed off as this fertilizer man who tried to make a movie, like that's some big joke. I just wanted to emphasize that there was more to this man than usually mentioned. He was a writer and performer long before this film. Now, Bernie Rosenblum said of Hal in the documentary Hotel Torgo, "We knew Hal Warren because he was an actor at Little Theater. We've known him for a couple of years. He was an actor, and he was a nice enough guy. Didn't realize that he was fucking nuts. Just totally nuts. I mean, just whacked out. 'Cause he was." Shelley Connor, his daughter from a second marriage, said of her father, he was a ham. Anyway, now here's the story as it's been reported, and some of it, or maybe all of it, might be apocryphal. Sterling Silliphant, who would go on to win the Academy Award in 1967 for the screenplay In the Heat of the Night, was a writer for the show Route 66. He had befriended Hal when Hal had a walk-on role on the show, and he was in town to scout locations. He and Hal had lunch together, and one thing led to another, and Hal bet Sterling that he could make a horror film with a very low budget. I always imagine Hal saying, "How hard could it be?" Warren began his first outline on the script on a napkin, right there while having coffee. The original title was Lodge of Sin. Now, up till now, when I was writing this, I always wondered if that story was just legend, but then I came across an article in a magazine called Cinema Sewer, which had an article written by Richard Brandt named The Hand That Time Forgot. In an interview with Tom Guidry, cinematographer on Manos, Tom said, "Well, Hal met Sterling Silliphant, the Oscar-winning screenwriter of In Heat of the Night, when he was scouting locations for Route 66, and the two of them got to be friends. Hal had a lot of conversations with Sterling about filmmaking and became convinced he could make a movie himself." So maybe there was something to the story. Now, Hal was able to raise about $19,000, which is not very much, not even close to what it takes to make a real movie. In fact, that money was barely enough to cover the film stock needed. So, how did he pay the actors and crew? By offering a percentage of the profits. Now, during production, according to Bernie Rosenblum, he and the cast started adding up their percentages, and they came up to about 150%. And that wasn't even including the people who actually put up money for the film. When he figured that in, he says it came to about 300%. Now, Jackie Neyman, who played the child Debbie in the film, said in an interview with Derek Diamond, "Manos is a miracle in itself because the whole cast and crew, including me as a child, caught on pretty early that this was not going to be a good movie, and Hal knew it too. But as things went on, people were getting really frustrated. Of course, the biggest issue of this film was the camera. They used a 16mm Bell & Howell camera that needed to be wound by hand. It shot about 32 seconds per wind. In the documentary Hotel Torgo in 2004, Bernie Rosenblum gave a demonstration of how the camera worked. And of course, the camera shot without sound. Now, shooting silent shouldn't have been a problem. I mean, after all, films in Europe had been made that way for years, decades. They would shoot the film first and record the dialogue afterwards. People don't even realize that much of the original Star Wars dialogue was recorded in post. How hard could it be, right?
You are a troublemaker. You deserve to die.
Now, somewhere along the way, he changed the name of the film to Fingers of Fate, and Tom Neyman, who played the Master, suggested Manos, the Hands of Fate. Hal liked that idea. The costumes for the Master's wives, who were hired from a modeling agency called Mannequin Manor, were created by Tom's wife Jacqueline, and according to Tom, some of the ladies were reluctant to wear them. Now, in the original script, the costumes were described as flowing white tight robes, but apparently Fran Simon, the owner of Mannequin Manor, said no. So this is what we got.
When the Master hears of this, he will be furious.
In a video on the Manos HD website called Manos Uncut, Diane said of Hal, "He wanted me to take my shirt off and I was just like, no, not doing that. I was young and very innocent. So when he asked me to take my shirt off and I refused, he said, that's good, I was just testing," she laughed. The film was shot on Judge Colbert Codwell's ranch in El Paso's Lower Valley. The pillars in the house were still standing there when the short film Torgo Hotel was made. The film is available on YouTube. In this scene, the officers don't check out the gunshots because, well, they didn't have enough light to light any more than what you see on camera. The film was shot mainly at night, so most of the cast and crew had to work their day jobs and then go film the movie at night, so tensions ran a little high, and from what I've read, Hal was pretty much of a prima donna on set, but credit to them all, they got the film done. According to Tom Neyman, once the film was done, Hal, Tom, John Reynolds, William Bryan Jennings all traveled in one car together on a 600-mile-plus trip to Dallas to record all the dialogue. They did all the males' voices, but for the women in the film, one lady who worked at the studio did the voices for all of them, and that's why we get things like this.
I'm getting cold, Mother, and hungry.
And
Those idiots that went deeper in the desert.
But Tom Guidry had something else to say. Then Hal, his wife, and Tom and Diane went to Sound Studio in Dallas to do their voices. Everybody else in the film was dubbed by two people. I can believe that Diane did her own voice. I mean, it sounds like her.
Very well. I won't tell my husband. Now let me out.
The premiere of Manos was held on November 15th, 1966 at the Capri Theater, and from everything I've read, it didn't go well. But Hal had it done big. He rented huge searchlights and a 1955 Cadillac that would drive around the block, pick up a couple of people, drive them to the theater, drop them off, then go back to pick up a couple more, making it look like each of the big stars were arriving one by one at the theater. Tom Neyman said when he got to the theater, he waited, and it was the worst thing he ever waited for. He stayed for the whole movie, but said, if I really thought I had a choice, I would have left. And he said, once the film was over, he left as quickly as possible. Diane said, after I watched about 5 minutes of it, I started laughing. I couldn't help it. I just thought it was so funny, and my mom was poking me. Diane, you can't laugh, stop it. Oh, Mom, how could you not laugh? Bob Guidry said, and as the film unreeled, you heard more and more laughs and catcalls. I started to slide down further and further in my seat. All my life I've lived for one thing, to see my name in the credits of a motion picture. Well, the credits for Manos aren't until the end of the picture, and I had sneaked out before then. Jackie Ray Neyman said, I just remember waiting anxiously to see myself on the screen. But when my mouth opened and this voice came out of my mouth, I was just horrified. Nobody told me any of that. She also said later, her father said he wished he was a snake, and he and his snake family could just slither out of the theater. Manos, The Hands of Fate, a movie produced in El Paso with an El Paso cast and by El Paso residents, opened Thursday night at the Capra Theater. Because of these aspects, it is interesting. Otherwise, this film, described as a horror thriller, shocking beyond belief, could have been, with some changes, a comedy. The audience, rather than being gripped with tension, ultimately laughed. This is a cruel reward for those who made this film and who sat in the audience for the premiere showing. They worked hard on this movie, and at moments it seemed truly professional. They are sincere in their hopes for a new industry for El Paso, and they have received professional encouragement. As for the plot, the film's producers have asked that it not be discussed at any length, but briefly, it involves a vacationing young couple and their child who take a wrong turn, and rather than arriving at some lodge, end up in this world of horror ruled by the Master. Perhaps the most surprising aspect of the production is that Hal Warren, who wrote, directed, produced, and starred in the movie, wrote for himself the worst part of the movie. Warren's lines are unbelievably hollow, and in the role creates early doubt as to the plot by taking his wife and young child into a broken-down house in the boondocks, guarded by a crippled, obviously demented old man, to spend the night. One of the most unusual scenes in the film is the Master's harem of women scantily attired in underclothing and flimsy negligees wrestling in the sand between mesquite bushes. It was a dandy fight. All the characters suffer at times from a lack of synchronization of lip movements with the sound, which was dubbed after the movie was complete. The film was apparently released by Emerson Films, and I assume it was just in a few theaters, probably drive-ins, and it didn't last long. Hal had hopes that this would lead to more films for his Sun City Film Company. Warren announced also that Sun City Films had been commissioned by Emerson to produce 2 more feature films for 1968. Hollywood names will be used in leading roles, supported by local acting talent. Among the Hollywood personalities mentioned as possibilities are James Drury, TV's Virginian, Sal Mineo, and Robert Strauss, best known for his portrayal of Animal in Stalag 17. Now, one can only dream. Now, one of these feature films was something called Satan Rides a Bike, and from what I've read, he had a comedy in mind. So you know what? Let's find these scripts, people. Let's find them and get these films made. And let's have them shot on the same 16mm Bell & Howell silent wind-up camera that Hal used. But then again, you know what? You only catch lightning in a bottle once, so maybe it's a fool's errand. I don't know. So now why don't we look at our cast? We've already talked about the film star, Harold P. Warren, and so let's start with Tom Neyman, who plays the Master. I start with Tom because he was the most accomplished actor of the bunch. Thomas Ivy Neyman Jr. was born in Brownsville, Texas, and lived from 1935 to 2016. After college, Tom went to school to become a minister, but quit right after graduation and eventually found himself in El Paso, where he was an artist and community theater actor. He was named Best Actor of the Year 3 times. He appeared in many stage productions, and, like I said, it was while appearing in Henry IV with Harold Warren that he got involved with this film. Most of the props and artwork seen in the film were created by Neyman, including all the statues of hands and the self-portrait that hung in the living room. He designed the wonderful costume he wears, and it was made by his wife Jacqueline. He even created the rig that gave Torgo his misshapen knees. The large Doberman? Well, that was the family dog Shanka. He also talked Hal into letting him write most of his own dialogue, using some of his ministry experience as a guide.
Thou who bestowest the mother darkness upon thy faithful, to live eternally in her keeping, thou dost make him most blessed forever. And thou who dost curse with eternal burning light those who transgress against thee.
I never took much of it very seriously. I didn't look at it as anything important, we just did it. And honestly, I don't know. I think the thing ended up in 2 tiny theaters in Texas and that was about it, and then went bye-bye, which didn't bother me in the least. After Manos, he continued with his art and acting career, as well as working with the El Paso Boys Club. Over the years, he was married 4 times. He lived his later years in Falls City, Oregon. He said when he saw it on MST3K, he was absolutely stunned and stated that Mystery Science Theater had done the most appropriate thing with it. He did appear in the sequel to Manos, Manos Returns. Diane Mahree plays Margaret, the wife of Harold P. Warren's character Michael. Diane Mahree Rystad was born in Des Moines, Iowa on May 17, 1944, and, as of this recording, is still alive. She was a very smart El Paso beauty. She is the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Grant A. Rystad. Miss Rystad, graduate of Irving High School, was a finalist in the Miss Teenage El Paso contest, runner-up for Miss Rodeo El Paso, top 10% of graduating class, president of a choir, annual business manager representative to Yelstata Festival, member of the Quill and Scroll, Neo-Re Tree High, and Science Seminar. Miss Rystad, now a junior at Texas Technical University, Lubbock, Texas, awarded a music scholarship, is honored on the Dean's List, dormitory wing secretary, and a member of Tech Singers. I will point out that she was 22 years old at the time of this film, and Harold P. Warren was 43. Apparently, Hal Warren entered her in the Miss El Paso beauty pageant because he thought it would be good publicity for the movie. After Manos, she worked as a model and even appeared on the cover of Vogue magazine as well as others. She lost interest in modeling, and after getting married, she began a new life dealing with antiques in Colorado. In her 60s, she fought cancer and won the battle. In 2004, a short 16-minute film was made about her called Mountain Girl. In it, she said, "I thought it was safely buried away because it was so bad. 40 years later, all of a sudden, it became a cult sensation as the worst movie ever made. For years, people believed I died in a fiery car crash right after the movie, but then somebody found me. To my surprise, I actually enjoy being part of the resurgence of Manos." John Reynolds plays everyone's favorite Torgo, the innkeeper of the master's house. John M. Reynolds Jr. was born in Jackson, Mississippi, and lived from 1941 to 1966. He was the son of Air Force Major General John M. Reynolds Sr. It is said he studied drama with Timothy Leary at the University of California, Berkeley. He was another local actor in El Paso, working with Tom Neyman on at least one production. And sadly, right after this film was released, John committed suicide with a shotgun. Now, it's been rumored that he became addicted to painkillers after wearing the apparatus on his legs that made him walk so weird, but the film was shot in 8 days, and one doesn't become addicted to painkillers in 8 days. No, John was already into drugs. He had a lot of personal problems and was suffering from depression, and it's sad. Anyway, Jackie Neyman, now Jackie Neyman Jones, plays the young child Debbie. Jackie Ray Neyman was born in Texas on July 2nd, 1959. She, of course, was the daughter of Tom Neyman. When she said her dad asked her if she wanted to be in the film, she was overjoyed to work with her father. And she and her pet dog Shanka were the only ones paid for their work on the film. She got a new bike and Shanka got a 50-pound bag of dog food. When making the film after a take, she would ask the director if that was okay, and he would use his favorite expression, "We'll fix it in the lab." She had no idea that what she said didn't matter at all, since all the dialogue was going to be overdubbed later. On a side note, everybody mentions that. That was Hal's favorite expression, "We'll fix it in the lab." Hey Hal, not everything can be fixed in the lab. At the premiere, she said when she heard the voice coming out of her mouth, she began to cry.
I'm getting cold, Mother, and hungry.
But no one benefited more from the rediscovery of this film than Jackie, and I don't mean that in a bad way. You can find many interviews with Jackie. She works with the Mads at Dumb Industry, wrote a book on her experiences, and even helped put together a sequel, Manos Returns, which brought back her father as well as Diane Mahree, and did a series called The Manos Chronicles. She now works as an artist, and she seems to be doing great, so. And the last actor I'll talk about is Joyce Muller, who plays the teenage girl who is kissing Bernie Rosenblum in the car. Joyce Ann Muller was born in Hamady, Oklahoma, and lived from 1946 to 2005. She was a model who began when she was 13 in New Mexico and then El Paso. Now, I don't know much about her after Manos, except she continued her modeling career. But if her scenes with Bernie in the car seem a little odd, there's a good reason why they are there. She was originally hired as one of the master's wives, but broke her foot rehearsing a scene. So Hal, being the nice guy that he was, wrote her a new scene so she could still be in the film. But Bernie noted that the two of them, cramped into a convertible with her leg in a cast, was not as much fun as it looks. She eventually sued Hal and his company for medical bills. Now, the music for the film was composed by two men, Buzz Huddleston and Robert Smith Jr., and I can't find out a lot about them. While the music soundtrack is excellent, done by Robert Smith and Ross Huddleston, it doesn't always make up for the lack of sound effects at certain times during the action. When a man is hit over the head and falls to the floor, the audience has come to expect a thud. Now, as far as I can tell, the song Forgetting You was sung by a local El Paso singer named Nicky Mathis. Now, there's a lot more I could go into here. I mean, there have been sequels, series, stage shows, puppet shows, coloring books, video games, and who knows what else based on the film. I mean, after all, it's public domain. There's too much for me to go into here, but I will talk about the restoration of the film. In 2011, Ben Solovey, a Florida State Film School graduate, came across the original 16mm work print of Manos and used a Kickstarter to get money to restore the film. And because of that, Joe Warren, the son of Harold Warren, tried to find out ways to copyright his dad's work, but I don't think he ever did. And that's all well and good, but I'd like to see somebody go beyond that. Redo the soundtrack, have good voice actors do the voices, new music, good sound effects, things like that. Yeah, I know it would ruin the original spirit of the film, but I think it would be interesting. See if you could make a good film out of Manos. And according to Jackie Nyman Jones, Hal Warren knew he made a bad film, but he embraced it. He would often wear the master's costume to Halloween parties. Harold Paul Warren died on December 29, 1985 in Scottsdale, Arizona at the age of 62. He was the owner of Creative Marketing Consultants Limited. So next week I'll watch the film. Yep, and I've got some thoughts on how this film could be made better. I mean, beyond the money part of it, and I hope you'll join me. Sorry the show was so long. It could have been longer. There's a lot to say about this movie, but I want you to take care, stay healthy, be good and understanding, and come back next week, all right? Bye-bye.